So, without further ado, I would like to invite to the stage Alexandra Deschamps-Sonsino, who is an entrepreneur from the UK. She's the founder of a design consultancy with a focus on IoT called designswarm. She's the founder of a startup that makes a beautiful family of connected lamps called the Good Night Lamp. She's also the author of an upcoming book about smart homes, out this fall, I believe. This summer? This fall? This summer, of course. One of the really people at the front line of IoT design research, and also practice. So we're super happy to have her here. Please welcome Alexandra Deschamps-Sonsino. May I hand you a camera tracker and a microphone?
Thank you very much. Do you know what the GDPR policy is on this tracker? Yep. You can mention Brexit. So fast, too soon. It's also Brexit. Good evening. Thank you for having me here. Thank you to Dries, who puts a lot of effort into getting everyone in this room and from this community. From Peter and Harm and Iskander, who have been putting ThingsCon events together for some years now. I think it's really hard work, and I think we underestimate. I mean, I just show up and I give talks. It's great. Like everything else is organized by them, so I think that's it's really important to highlight the people who are running these communities. I would also encourage you as much as you possibly can not to leave after you hear everyone talk, and to actually come and talk to myself and all the other speakers and everybody else, and yourselves included. I think it's really important not to just be participants in something, but to be actors in a community and to actually come and dig into the topics that you'll hear about today. I wanted to use up my 15 minutes to talk in two ways about similar types of problems, I think. And I entitled my talk So Fast, Too Soon, because I feel like sometimes we have sort of put ourselves into a right mess. The Internet of Things is now technically 17 years old as a term. So the term was coined in 2001. If you want to talk about the role of technology in kind of everyday life and everyday objects, then track back another 40 years or so. But as a term and as a thing to attach things to, and it's 17 years old. And we have some pretty good documentation of that process. We have some pretty good communities. We have some excellent companies. We have some not so excellent corporations. Everyone is looking in this space, and everyone has invested in this space in the last few years. And I come to you in May 2018 thinking about what have we actually done, or what have we actually achieved. Firstly, there's some great books out there. Books written by friends of mine, books written predominantly in Europe by Europeans, by people in this community, which I think is terrific. But there's no real methodology around any of this. There's no kind of, best practice from A to Z over how to create a connected product. Even from within extremely large organizations, everything is sort of done bespoke every single time. And it kind of means that there's also no framework for success, because if you don't really have a way of doing things, then you don't really know if the thing that you're making is being done in the right way. And you don't really understand what success might mean. People have different take on success as well. And for the more aggressive parts of our community, we might also say that we've mostly contributed to a ton of e-waste, because a lot of products have been designed that now no longer work, firmware hasn't been updated, things just end up in drawers if they don't end up in the bin. And the poor kind of replacement that we have for real policy around this, which is the WEEE directive, W-E-E-E, is absolutely weak and does not force anyone to deal with this e-waste in any productive manner. So if you were going to be very, very aggressive onto the world of IoT, that's one of the things you could say. And to go back to this idea of success, we also associate very old metrics of success to the world of IoT. We think that selling a product is a notion of success. How many units did you sell? How many units are out there? Not how are they used, not for how long they've used, not how long did it take before someone just dropped them in the bin or stopped using them. The more aggressive part of the community that's involved in kind of contributing to this, you could say, would be the wearable community. Everyone has at some stage bought a wearable and usually within a few months has stopped using it. And this is, part of human life and human consumption, but it's also something that isn't particularly well managed by that community. They're just happy to sell us the next step counting thing. And really, methodologies, I come from the education of industrial design. In industrial design, over 15 years ago, I used to be taught about cradle to cradle and design for disassembly, which were mechanisms for thinking about a more holistic way of looking at how we use our resources, how we design things, how we do industrial design. That has mostly been completely ignored by the IoT community. Almost nobody I know has ever designed any piece of connected experience that you can disassemble. Almost no one I've ever met in any IoT context have ever mentioned cradle-to-cradle methodologies to me. These exist in traditional design environments, they exist in traditional industrial design environments or architectural design environments, but IoT somehow has skipped over that whole bit of history. And then we end up with stuff that's a little bit dodgy on the security side, and because we say, well, it's too expensive to implement, it's too difficult, it's too taxing to think about these things, and it's just too much fuss, and we don't have the time, and we're bootstrapping and an incubator, and we don't have enough money, so security out the door. And then we end up with very, very public displays of security failure that end up tarnishing everyone else. It's going great, right? We also have a design education system that's barely catching up with the idea of digitization of anything. So I went to the Milan Furniture Fair 2-3 weeks ago, and the best thing I saw there was by ECAL, which is a school in Lausanne, that had basically, invented storytelling around 3D printing in a really beautiful way. Like, they were still talking about 3D printing. They were still using 3D printing to print beautiful glasses and beautiful ashtrays and beautiful things. And that's as techie as it got this year. And it was kind of like, oh my God, this could have been done 15 years ago. So if we don't have a design education market to cater to IoT, what do we got? We have an engineering education, which, at best focuses on all the technical problems, but then you kind of get them out of school and then they don't really know how to make anything in the world and how to deal with manufacturing. So that's also a little bit strange. You have a computing education, which is obviously highly problematic because of all the things that we're reading right now around ethics, around how user experience is considered, all the biases that we have as human beings built into the computing systems that we get people to code. So obviously that's also problematic. And user experience is generally a thing that you do once you've shipped the product. If you were lucky enough to ship the product, if you had enough money to ship the product, and if you're still standing while you're shipping the product. And if you're in business, you're doing an MBA, well, good luck to you, because chances are you never will have encountered an engineer, a designer, anybody who's actually involved in making things. So you have lofty ideas around what a business model might mean, but then you meet a team, you work with them, and you go, oh my God, this takes so much more competences than I thought would. This takes so much more time than I thought it would, and why can't we raise any money? Because no one wants to invest in hardware. And I won't even mention customer support because no one ever thinks about that. I'll skip over these two for the sake of time. And skip over to, the golden cow that was crowdfunding. We thought that we could sort of solve all our problems with money and fast money. And it turns out that fast money is probably the last thing that most teams need. It forces them in a situation of high stress and delivery timelines, which they absolutely cannot usually achieve. And so anybody claiming to be able to ship anything in less than a year and a half is lying, but they're happy to lie to a community of people who are happy to buy the lie. And I think that's really toxic for us. And it kind of just takes advantage of people, I think, ultimately. So we have a set of decision-making, we had a set of frameworks that don't really work anymore. We are kind of thinking, well, does IoT sit in an agile methodology or is it a double diamond methodology? And if it's both, how does that work? If we used to invent things in a really kind of clear way where we had patents and then we had people who just bought a license to use our patent and then we made money off of that, how can we live in that world anymore? We're really not in that world anymore. And are we in the product design world where you would have designed something but you never would have had to carry the manufacturing load? You just kind of design something in your studio or, on CAD and you ship it over to someone else who's bought that design from you. They do all the stuff, they do all the manufacturing, they take on the heavy load. But it's, not as exciting maybe as being an entrepreneur and dealing with this complexity. And, crowdfunding is great because maybe it cuts out a bunch of activities that maybe are not needed anymore. Do we need to worry about IP anymore? It's 2018. Ideas are cheap. Maybe we want to go directly to market. We want to go directly to manufacturing. So maybe everything is broken. But maybe great, everything is broken. Which means that maybe we should have more books. There should be more things that we write about. There should be more stories that we tell around the Internet of Things. And maybe there's no methodology, and people like Dries can help develop methodologies because they're kind of sitting outside looking in, are able to see the swarm of stories that are happening and things that are happening to people, and they're very, sometimes quite public, and that's helpful. It helps us build methodologies. And maybe we can create our own framework for success. So this being one of them, which is Open IoT Mark, which is just a project to look at whether we can create a certification mark for connected product experiences. I'm steering this. I'm not going to talk about it here, but I'm happy to talk about it later. And maybe we can, off of this pile of e-waste that we know we have, maybe we can help bootstrap completely different industries and completely different ecologies that don't exist anymore. We are coming to the end of China taking back our crap. And so that means we're going to have to live with our own stuff that we produce. So we can do that. We can create industries that do that. We can create wealth and local wealth. And maybe the sale of a product experience should be really about the sale of an experience. There happens to be a product in it, but the product will live, will die, will be disposed of because it'll be taken back, it'll be recycled, it'll be given off to someone else. And that's a story you can sell to people. The reason why everybody wears those stupid Tom's shoes is because they bought the idea that someone was getting a shoe somewhere else. I'm sorry for anybody wearing Tom's shoes in the room. But that works. It works as an experience. It works as an experience that's just not just your shoe, it's also what you give other people. You can sell people completely different experiences that have nothing to do with just the sale that you make. And as for the methodologies that exist now, the really good methodologies around reuse, repair, cradle to cradle, we have to start exposing people who are not in design education and design circles to those. We have to start to talk to people about them. We have to start to collaborate. We're really kind of good at collaboration, but sometimes not good enough. And I think that's one of the areas where we could do better. If security is too expensive, then we have to grow a network of security experts who are freelancers. When I started, I was the first UK distributor of the Arduino. At that time, you couldn't find a freelance electronics engineer that didn't exist because everybody was well-fed by nice salaries in industry. I think we can create the same for the security sector. We can coerce people out of their well-paid jobs because, maybe they're up for an adventure. And we can create enough work for them that it becomes a viable freelance type career, contract type career. Now I meet electronics engineers who are freelancers all the time in England. I think we can do the same here. And let's, get universities to come and work in startups. Let's not just treat universities like, oh, they might have access to H2020 funding. Like, that's nice. It's kind of lazy. There's students there. They want experience. It's not going to be full-time. They're not going to be in your team embedded in there, but they're going to be helpful, and they're going to learn a lot. And maybe when they graduate, they come and work for you. And it used to be how we used to really talk to students as an industry. We're not very big corporations, but we have a little bit of time. We can come in, we can give a talk, we can talk to someone about their project, we can build relationships. If we can do that with the average person in the street, why can't we do that inside universities? And for universities, if they're in the room, send your students out to meetups, send your students out to ThingsCon's events, send them out to see what's going on and what people are building and what problems they're having. Same for computer science. And UX is also one of those things where I kind of wish there was a sort of secret cabal of UX practitioners who just came in and then came out again. Who came in and went, oh my God, you're early stage, don't do this. Well, no matter what you do, just don't do that. And they come out again, and it's a couple of hours of work, but it's enough to go, oh shit, yeah, that person's really smart. Maybe I might want to work with them some more. And the same for business students. Get them to see the reality before they kind of come out with their shiny MBA and just go work in banking, because it feels more secure somehow. Same for customer support. I think there's a real thing there about customer support for IoT. I don't think anybody has this nailed. I spend a lot of my money on customer support and good customer support for my customers. And it's a trick, it's a skill. The person who I came in, brought in, she had, regular customer support experience, and now she really gets it and she really knows. It's an entire field of its own. So I think we can train people up to respond to very complex hardware, software problems and troubleshooting experiences. And I think they'll do great. So I think that we could do with getting real, telling stories, sharing those stories, and making these things feel like an opportunity rather than doom and that everything is broken. More books, more publications, more stories, more terrible stories of people failing left, right, and center. And I include myself in everything that I do in that bucket, but it's just not happening enough. And I think it's an invitation to ThingsCon, the ThingsCon community, of people to tell real stories. Like, what's going on and why did this not work out? Or what did this work out? And I think we have to do this because I think we're really at a really sensitive time right now. Everybody is getting very excited by AR and VR and fintech and cryptocurrency and all these kind of shiny new things. And they're going to drop IoT like yesterday's underwear if we don't do something. And doing something means working together more, actively participating in projects and understanding where the challenges are, nipping the challenges in the bud in the beginning, and helping people be more successful and raise money. And I think that we're capable of doing it as a community, as a global community, but also as a hyper-local community. So you're 40-odd people in this room. Ideally, by the end of the evening, you know each other and you start working with each other within the next 2 years or so. Maybe you see each other more often. Maybe every month you bump into each other and something happens. Movement has to happen around this space on a continual basis. Otherwise, it becomes another one of those, trends, which, we don't want to be a trend. We are an industry. So thanking you. This is probably slightly over my 15 minutes, but thanking you for your time and looking forward to the rest of the talks.
Let's do a couple of questions before we move on. All right, let's hear a bit more about customer support.
So for Goodnight Lamp, which is my product, we deal with a series of problems that have everything to do with like the whole stack. It can be a hardware thing, it could be a shipping condition thing, it can be a firmware update thing, it can be, because my product is based on 2G technologies, so it can be that somewhere of one vendor down there's a mast that has problems, and so my one customer support person has to cater to all of this thinking, has to document all these issues for us to be able to have strategies to move on when we do further development. So right now we're developing a new product. It's the same product, but for the US market. So using NB IoT, newfangled, exciting, etc. But it means a whole new supply chain in the US. And it means I can take the learnings that she's documented in a particular way and apply them to our requirements for design for this new product. And that's very, I would say it's an operations role and a support role at the same time, which isn't your average. I would never want to outsource this to some chatbot service or some third-party service. And it's a byproduct of both being a small enterprise, yes, but also the complexity of problems that can happen. It also is a byproduct of how much I can squeeze my third-party technical vendors on their ability to support me. So for example, the vendor that we have right now for the connectivity piece is called SI. SI have, of course, lines of support, ticketing systems, blah, blah, blah. I send something through, it might take a week before they know what's going on, because the way in which they've worked with us is unlike any other product that they have. And it requires Laura, who works with me, to be like constantly prodding and constantly going, guys. And so internally at SI, it escalates from the poor person who has to deal with my ticket back to the CTO, back to the poor person who deals with my ticket, back to Laura. So, and her ability to go, okay, I can see what they're doing here, and I can see the complexity of what they're dealing with, or actually, you know what, this is this kind of issue, so we'll just write this off. Don't worry, you guys can't help us anyway. That lateral thinking is something that I think is a set of skills that it's not your average customer support service. Well, the customer experience of our brand as lived through both their purchase, the product itself, and customer service is something that we are extremely precious about. And so her relationship with the customer is, people don't get an email back from support. They get an email back from Laura, because it's Laura who works on it. And that's something that with scale we think about a lot. And we think about how do we do more, because now we're going to end up with customers who are US based. And so their expectations are going to be slightly different, time zone wise as well. And so we think on hiring decisions that we might make in the US for their time zone, as opposed to try to be too international, too big, because that level of complexity, I don't want to be mass training a bunch of people into, I would say, predictable responses, because actually the problems are not predictable.
I think all speakers will also be available to chat after this. So maybe we'll end the Q&A at this point. Thank you so much, Alex.